So, Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson just penned another riveting chapter in what's quickly becoming one of the great careers and stories in the world of mixed martial arts. The UFC is limping into Paris this weekend, and Nate Diaz is making hilarious headlines once again. What is up, guys, and welcome into NEWSWIRED, where I take you through the latest news and spin in the world of mixed martial arts. No UFC this weekend, obviously, so a lot of the big headlines, a lot of the big sticking points, they err more towards the side of conjecture and hearsay more than anything else, but still a fun weekend in mixed martial arts nonetheless. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Sure helps out a lot. That way you get up with the latest in Good Willie MMA. So without further ado, guys, let's take a quick trip over to Paris, France for our first news hit of the day. Obviously, the UFC will be making its long-anticipated debut in Paris this coming weekend, and the card's underwent a number of changes since being originally announced. If you recall, Manon Fiorot was supposed to be fighting on this show. She was supposed to be fighting Katlyn Chookagian. An injury quickly forced Chookagian out of that bout, and then in steps Jessica Andrade up from 115 pounds. Out steps Andrade with an injury. Back in steps Chookagian. And then Fiorot gets forced out of the bout with an injury of her own. So it looks like we'll be getting that fight in October. But another popular French combat sports artist, Cedric Doumbé, was also supposed to be competing this weekend, but the Parisian Commission forced Doumbé out of his fight, with Darian Weeks citing a lack of experience on the part of Doumbé. Although Doumbé holds a 75-7-1 record in the kickboxing world, the Parisian Athletic Commission states that fighters with less than 10 fights of experience cannot fight another fighter with more than 4 fights of professional experience more than them. And the Weeks and Doumbé booking just overshot that threshold apparently. So Doumbé is going to be facing an uphill climb to get cleared to fight in his home country against any opponent the UFC could book him against. The UFC looks like they went ahead and released Doumbé from his contract, although Doumbé disputes this himself, saying that it really just came down to a matter of him not filling out certain paperwork. Although, you know, rules are rules, and this seems to check out. So, Doumbé, you know, would he have been signed to the UFC without this Paris expansion? It's tough to say. Probably not, which is why I think the promotion went ahead and got this release done. This type of thing isn't unprecedented. When Askar was set to fight Cody Stamann, which is almost about 2 years ago now, Askar ended up failing his pre-fight physical. They found a heart abnormality, the UFC's doctors did, so that forced him out of the bout, but other doctors and other commissions have since cleared him to compete, and I think he actually just recently competed in the state of California. So, always a chance that he ends up back in the UFC one day. And I think the same can be said for Doumbé, too. Very talented kickboxer, Doumbé is. And we've seen that discipline translate quite a bit more in recent times than it has in the past. So, no doubt he'll find his way to the UFC at some point. That is, unless Bellator gets their dirty paws on him. I know they've been doing fights in France since the legalization. So, he's definitely a name to keep an eye on, but for now, he will not be fighting this weekend. For our next bit of news, we'll turn to the bare knuckle world, where several UFC fighters, or former UFC fighters I should say, in the twilight of their careers have turned to. This past weekend, UFC Flyweight veterans did battle as John Dodson took on Ryan Benoit, with Dodson getting the first round TKO in beautiful fashion, knocking Benoit down 3 times in the first round. Dodson didn't appear to lose much during the transition. He looked like his quick, explosive, fast twitch self, and was able to get the big win in his bare knuckle debut. You won't hear me discussing the bare knuckle world too much on this channel, not at least unless a notable figure in the world of MMA is involved with it. It's a weird sport that, you know, never really resonated to me. If you're a fan, right, and you want to see fighters throw hands, you watch boxing typically. If you want to see them get more involved with it and incorporate kicks, some knees, some clinch work, you'll go to kickboxing or Muay Thai. And MMA puts all of it together and does so in this grand spectacle that we love so much. But bare knuckle, it seems to really cater more towards the least common denominator type of fan. You know, the just bleed. You know, everybody knows that photo. actually been to a UFC event or a mixed martial arts event, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. I can remember back at UFC 262 in Houston, Tony Ferguson's fighting Beneil Dariush, and Beneil decides to take the fight to the ground. People in my section they completely lost their minds. It was really something to behold, and I don't think the broadcast even really did it justice in watching it back. So yeah, I think the sport just kind of is meant to cater towards those types of people. The viewership seems to be a bit of a mixed bag, so I'm not really sure where the money's coming from per se. But that being said, as long as the fighters are getting paid handsomely, they're going to keep going towards it. And as long as that's happening, I'll keep talking about it. It's also an odd sport in that it doesn't really prove as much as the other sports seem to. Obviously, MMA scoring criteria is one that can use some work, and those will be the types of conversations we have on this channel. Boxing can be corrupt in many ways, but at least at the end of those contests, especially if you get the finish, you know who the better fighter was, you know who the better martial artist was. With bare knuckle, it's really who's the better brawler, but that's not something that we've commonly associated with sport in the past, so I don't know, maybe it's something that will catch on in my mind down the line. But like I said, as long as UFC fighters are getting paid handsomely to do this type of thing, we'll keep talking about it because it is newsworthy in that case. So Quentin Jackson's back in the news again after going dormant for a number of months after Triller's last Triad Combat event. Rampage is back to tell us, stay tuned. TMZ caught up with Rampage recently in an interview where he addressed his future in combat sports. To that, Rampage had this to say: "No man, I ain't done. I'm not happy with my performance in my last fight. I can't leave MMA fans like that. I'm going to leave this sport a little bit better. Like I said, I'm in talks with fighting Shannon Briggs finally. That fight has been like almost a year in the making. I want to do some boxing before I retire. I might do MMA, but I want to do boxing. I'm getting up there. I'm 44, man. I'm getting up there. My knees hurt from wrestling. When you're doing MMA, a lot of people want to take you down. They want to wrestle you. So there you have it. Personally, I'm here for a Rampage versus Shannon the Cannon fight. I'm not totally sure what discipline it would be in. I cannot see Shannon accepting an MMA fight with Rampage, although I don't think Rampage would wrestle in that event either. I think it would just be more of a stand-up fight in a cage, kind of like what Tyson Fury requested with Francis Ngannou. Ugh. Honestly, I think the Triad Combat format might be best for a Rampage versus Shannon fight. I mean, the rule set is somewhat superfluous, but it's a tiny triangular ring, and you get two guys in there with the size, the physical stature, and egos that Shannon Briggs and Rampage Jackson have, and you're gonna get chaos out of that. And on this channel, we like chaos. We thrive in chaos. So now we go to arguably the top story of the weekend, which saw Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson take back the One FC Flyweight Championship from Adriano Moraes in a great main event of the inaugural One on Prime Video event. Mighty Mouse getting the belt back in the fashion he did should be a nice little coup for the Singaporean-based company as they look to begin their new relationship with Amazon Prime. The fight actually played out, I think, in a way that a lot of people would have expected it to go. Moraes is such a big, talented guy for the weight class, though it is worth mentioning that although this was for the One FC Flyweight Championship, in One, they recognize the flyweights like how we would recognize the UFC bantamweights. So it's the 135-pound weight class, but either way, Moraes is massive for that weight, and he's really got more of a featherweight-like frame, so the early minutes would have figured to favor him for his pace and power. But after that, one could have definitely seen Johnson taking over if he could get into the later rounds, and that's exactly what happened. Moraes put the pressure on Johnson, kept him on bottom early, almost put him away with a second-round head kick. But Johnson was able to recover, he was able to wait out the rest of the round, and then by the third round, the tide began to turn. So once DJ got a hold of the fight, he started stinging Moraes with combinations to the body, combinations to the head, and then eventually got him on wobbly legs in the fourth round and delivered a picture-perfect running knee that looked eerily similar to the one that put him out about this time last year that gave Moraes the belt in the first place. While the win wasn't at flyweight per se, I think that makes it even more magnanimous for the career of Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson. Speaking personally, he's in my top 5 all time. I know Joe Rogan has said on numerous occasions he believes Demetrious is the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, and I think he certainly does have a case for that. Although the flyweight division didn't have the eyeballs that the UFC would have wanted it to, I think under his reign of terror, Mighty Mouse boasts one of the most well-rounded skill sets. He's been doing it for, over a decade now, well over a decade now. I think I first saw him fight Ian McCall in the inaugural UFC Flyweight tournament. I missed his WEC career, but that fight had to have been 12 years ago. So for him to have been fighting at the level he has for such a long time, and the diversity of wins that he has in both the UFC and One, which honestly it gives more opportunities to fighters his size, all things considered. When I prioritize the all-time greats in this sport, I try and do it by total number of title defenses, the diversity of title wins on their record, in addition to, if they did happen to lose any fights, were they able to avenge that loss? Were they able to right that wrong? And it's for that reason that Georges St-Pierre ranks number 1 on my list. Not to get too far into the weeds with pound-for-pound lists or anything like that, but the fact that he lost to Matt Hughes and Matt Serra and was able to right those wrongs on his record, shows a lot to me. Did he beat Johnny Hendricks? I mean, I suppose that might be a discussion for another time, but that to me is the picture of an all-time great MMA career. It's not about retiring undefeated like Khabib did, although, his career kind of speaks for itself in a number of other ways. But Mighty Mouse, getting this one back against Moraes is huge. If he can win the trilogy, then, you're really going to start to get people talking, because this is just an all-world talent. MMAsucka.com, a site that I'm personally affiliated with, called Mighty Mouse a generational talent, and it's tough to argue at this point. And now for our next bit of news, we move from cozy Singapore to none other than Stockton, California. Nate Diaz was recently paid a visit by a USADA representative ahead of his welterweight fight against Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 279. But rather than take a piss, Diaz smoked a blunt.
This man won't get out of my house because I didn't give him enough piss.
So obviously I think that clip just kind of speaks for itself. Nate Diaz pulling out the blunt in front of the USADA rep, looking to take his urine, and obviously having not collected enough. Nate and friends raising hell over that. Important to remember that in 2015, the Nevada State Athletic Commission suspended his brother Nick 5 years for testing positive for marijuana metabolites. I believe following the fight with Anderson Silva. It is funny and noteworthy the change in how these commissions and USADA sees marijuana in mixed martial arts. It wasn't that long ago where fighters would get suspended for it routinely, but now the testing agency just decided to look the other way. They reported in early 2021 that was going to be a policy they start working in. So no mas do fighters have to worry about those marijuana metabolites that played Nick Diaz popping up in their urine samples. So now here you have Nate Diaz, one of the 2 poster children for marijuana in mixed martial arts, sticking it to USADA in a way that only he knows how. And the one thing that I just can't get over is the rep guy. He keeps covering his face when Nate would put the camera on him. But we got at least 2 really solid looks at it. And personally, I think he looks like Creed Bratton from The Office. If any of you guys watched that show, spitting image to me. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Our last news hit of the day isn't so much news as it is me just wanting to give my personal take and reaction to some comments that Daniel Cormier made over the weekend. DC, the former 2-weight class champion in the UFC, and in my opinion, one of the all-time great fighters, he's become known more and more for his hot takes as of late. It was good to see that he recently admitted to his wrongdoing in Talgate, but nevertheless, he had some comments to make about Khamzat Chimaev on the latest episode of his podcast, 3 Rounds with DC. Coming off the barn burn that we saw between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman at UFC 278 in Salt Lake City, where obviously Edwards got his real-life Rocky moment when he kicked Usman's head into the next hemisphere. DC had some comments to make about Chimaev, of all people. DC called him a loser from that outcome, saying that, and I quote, "I think last weekend he did not understand that he was the biggest loser in the Usman versus Leon situation because he was in line. All he had to do was get past Diaz. All he had to do was get past Diaz. You fight for the championship. But with Leon Edwards winning right now we get a trilogy, and rightfully so." That leads to the question, what is this fight for? DC added. I feel like for Diaz, this fight is for legacy. I feel like for Chimaev, this is just another scalp on his resume because I don't know if this win necessarily puts him closer than he already is to a championship fight. And because of the result last weekend, he'll need one more. I just wonder who that one more is going to come against. If he beats Diaz, does he get Covington next? As a disclaimer, you are going to hear me criticize DC quite a bit on this channel. Don't get me wrong, I love DC the fighter. Daniel Cormier, the MMA fighter, the wrestler, you know, he's going to go down as one of the all-time greats. And for me, he's a shoe-in for top 15 and possibly even a top 10 fighter for the way that, you know, he won championships in multiple weight classes. For me, that is a big plus. That said, this is kind of a dumb take. I mean, it sort of paints Chimaev like it's almost Chimaev's fault that Edwards went out there and did the unthinkable and when he knocked out Usman. Is he a loser from that? He doesn't have to be. I mean, the Nate Diaz fight, the stakes are really the same. There was no guarantee that he was going to be next in line anyway. You know, these things, these title situations, they can be fluid and they can be unpredictable. And I know Chael Sonnen has said, well, just because Usman had this reign, it doesn't necessarily mean he's next in line. I don't want to fall too far into the weeds with that and start advocating for a Colby Covington title shot or anything like that. But I will say that all it takes, Usman's 35, all it takes is one bad training injury to force him out of a trilogy, and then in steps the next best guy. Who's the next best guy? Who's the next guy in line? Well, it's going to be Chimaev if he beats Diaz. I don't think the win does much for him, but I think he's already at the point where you can argue him anywhere in the top 5 in the division based on resume. I mean, that Gilbert Burns fight just kind of speaks for itself. But to say Chimaev's a loser, it's just not a good take. Not to mention, he's got this headlining spot with Diaz, and I would say that the Diaz brothers, Nick and Nate, are two of the most organic draws the UFC's got in its disposal right now, and will continue to be so long as they are under contract. Now, whether that happens after this fight seems unlikely, but you never say never in this sport. So Chimaev stands to gain a lot from having the eyeballs of the Diaz fight on pay-per-view. And I'm sure the pay-per-view will be well bought too. I know the card is totally atrocious. Kevin Holland, Daniel Rodriguez is obviously a plus, as is the co-main event and just general presence of Tony Ferguson. Although I've got some takes on that fight, you'll definitely be hearing in the lead-up. But no, Chimaev's not a loser. Coming off that fight, I don't think his status really changes too much. His mission is still the same, to get in there and basically show whatever he wants to show against Diaz. Diaz is a marathon guy. You know, he loves a good marathon. He's going to want to get in there for 5 rounds and scrap. So I don't think Chimaev is going to be in too much danger early. He'll probably get to do whatever he feels like doing to Diaz, I would imagine. But if he bites off a little too much more than he can chew, Diaz could, you know, come on strong in the championship rounds and then pull some black magic or white magic, depending on your definition. But ultimately, whatever Chimaev wants to show, it's really up to him. If he wants to go in there and squash Nate Diaz like a bug, you know, will he be able to do that? I don't know. If that's the objective of him, though, I think that that could go a long way towards making him a star. I think that's what the UFC wants him to do. But we'll explore that more as we get closer to UFC 279 here in a couple weeks. So what are your thoughts on all this? Do you think DC has a point about Chimaev, or do you agree with me and think that his take is unreasonable at best? And what about Mighty Mouse? Where do you guys rank him amongst the all-time greats? Is he an all-time great? Be sure to let me know in the comments. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new to the channel and you like what you saw, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and remember to like, comment, and share this video, which should hopefully be the first of many coming up. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching today. I'll catch you in the next one.